Globally, women have fewer opportunities compared to men despite being half of the world population. But why does it matter? Gender gap is widest in low and middle income countries. Some studies show that women participation is linked to economic growth, low unemployment rate, and high standard of living. Gender equality also correlates with effective democracy, which in turn weakens terrorism. Thus, women empowerment is a critical aspect of achieving gender equality. Yet, gender issues are not focused on women alone, but on the equal relationship between men and women in the society. But before we talk about the present issues, we should know how strong our women really were. Before the term feminism and LGBT ever existed, there was the Babaylan. They were the religious leaders skilled in traditional medicine, spiritual medium, and even sorcery. They are not below the Datu, but instead work side by side with them in everyday administration. This important role was not only given to women, but to men as well, who were usually effeminate or blatantly homosexual. These male babaylans were also allowed to marry same-sex, a homosexual union in pre-colonial era. Moreover, if Datu had no son, the daughter could take over the position of Datu. Inherited properties were equally divided among children regardless of gender. In marriage, the woman didn't lose her name and it was also her prerogative to name her children. She also had the rights to obtain divorce and remarry. Women were not barred to do the job of men, and men were allowed to do the job of women. Male-dominated culture started during the Spanish colonization. They demonized the Babaylans as they believed it endowed its powers from black magic as well as they suppressed women to homes. This gender inequality even continued today not only in the Philippines but to other countries as well. As of now, there are still existing problems that need to be addressed so that we can attain the equality everyone is fighting for. Well, as of today, here are the gender issues that need to be resolved.
Victims of hate crimes and violence, sexual harassment, wage gap, women's health, marginalization and social exclusion, impact of family reactions on LGBT children, conflict and rejection, problems of homelessness, marginalization of LGBT men and women, psychological distress, poor economic condition and discrimination in the workplace, barriers to care, problems of criminalization, legal injustice.
Relatively, only 6 countries give women equal legal right works as men. The World Bank's recent Women, Business and the Law report measured gender discrimination in 187 countries. Furthermore, one area where gender disparities are evident in the workplace is the disparity in compensation received by men and women employees for work of similar value. According to a 2013 ILO report, the worldwide disparity pay is 23%. Finally, hate crimes and violence became the major and constant problem in this particular societal issue. Some studies show that more than 1/3 of women around the world have experienced violence at some point in their lives, and it can happen in the workplace. Sexual harassment is a form of violence that through a show of power, intimidates, humiliates, and affects another person's dignity. This behavior is sexual in nature and undesired. It is perceived by the victim as a condition to keep the job or as one that creates a hostile and intimidating work environment. With this pervasive inequality, the UN and other international human rights bodies formulated action plans to solve this. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution obligates the Philippines to follow covenants and resolutions issued by the United Nations and other international bodies. These include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states,
everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms without distinction of any kind, including sex. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which requires to abolish existing laws and practices which are discriminatory against women. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights calls for the protection of all individuals' the civil and political rights without distinction of any kind, including sex. Finally, in Tunen v. Australia, the term sex in all conventions should include sexual orientation leading to LGBT rights. 3 other resolutions were issued calling for elimination of discrimination on people with diverse sexuality.
In response to these covenants and resolutions, Philippines enacted several local laws to eliminate the discrimination on women like RA 9710 or the Magna Carta of Women, RA 7192 or the Women in Development and Nation Building Act, RA 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, RA 11313 or the Safe Spaces Act, and several more like BAUC, Anti-Rape Law, and Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act. Because of these laws, the Philippines remains as the top country in Asia and 14th in the world in terms of closing the gender gap according to the 2020 Global Gender Gap Report. Despite of this, discrimination still remains, especially for women in marginalized sectors like poor areas and LGBT. To address this remaining discrimination, we formulate these following action plans,
including amending or repealing existing law and enacting new laws. Repeal Article 202 of Revised Penal Code that penalizes prostitute victims as criminals instead of violence against women. Repeal Article 247 of Revised Penal Code because it gives a married person permission to kill a spouse who is caught committing sexual intercourse with another person. The parents may do the same to a below 18-year-old daughter doing sexual intercourse. Repeal Article 333 and 334 of Revised Penal Code. The penalty for married women doing adultery is harsher than married men doing concubinage. Repeal Presidential Decree 1083 puts preference on Muslim men in family relations, property administrations, legal guardianship, marriage, and inheritance. Amend Article 14, 19, 124, 211, and 225 of Family Code puts preference to the husband over the wife in giving consent to their children's marriage, administration of common property, and parental authority. If the wife disagrees, her remedy is to resort to the court. This should be amended where both of them should go to the court in case of disagreement. Enact SOGI or Equality Act by penalizing discrimination on the basis of actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. SOGI concerns should be also included in the Gender and Development Program in addition to women empowerment. Enact a law granting double deduction to gross income of any entities on the amount actually spent on gender and development programs like seminars, gender sensitivity training, and other similar. Include gender and development program in basic education curriculum through adding comprehensive sexuality and sex education, gender sensitivity trainings for students and faculties, and reviewing existing school materials for possible outdated gender stereotypes. Enacting annulment or divorce with the following grounds: irreconcilable marital differences, legal separation for at least 5 years, domestic or marital abuse, infidelity including adultery and concubinage.
After proposing all the mentioned amendments and enactments in favor of women for establishment of gender equalities, the implementation of this must be strictly monitored and evaluated by the government agencies like the Commission on Human Rights and Philippine Commission on Women. Thus, our team also proposes the creation and adaptation of chatbot to different workplaces, organizations, and even for the public to access certain information regarding their rights and to have a platform to safely report violence that they are experiencing. This will educate, inform, and encourage the public to defend and fight for their rights. The chatbot has different features wherein in just one click, you can have an access about general information. your rights as a person, especially with regards to your gender role, and to report your situation.
This chatbot aims to encourage everyone to speak up about their violated rights, easily track reports about inequalities, and quickly address these concerns and provide simple assistance in defending everyone's right.
With that, when is the right time to end gender disparities? Do you want to just turn blind on this issue? Are we just ignoring this unbeaten societal problem? Well, we have to act now.